You're listening to The Deep Ones, a Mosaic and Koven Chronicles short story by Andrea Pearson. Copyright 2019, Andrea Pearson. Nicole grabbed a pen and paper, pinching the phone between her ear and shoulder as she took notes. "People are going crazy," the man said, his Spanish accent getting stronger as he became more agitated. "They're doing crazy things. Vomiting all over the ruins. Jumping in the water, even jumping out of the castle windows. Something is there. Something is drawing them to it. And they are killing themselves trying to reach it." He fell silent for a moment, before continuing. "But we don't know exactly what is making them go so insane. Their brains just stop functioning and shut down completely. If we remove them from the ruins, they get better. But if we allow them to get close again, the same thing happens over again. There is something in the ruins that is driving everyone to madness. And it's a magical item?" It wouldn't surprise Nicole if it was. The man had obviously sought her out for a reason. "Yes. It has to be. We called on people who focus on monsters and magical entities, and they reacted just the same as everyone else, and didn't find anything. You are the last person we could think of to help." Nicole half smiled, deciding not to be offended by his choice of words. She understood what he meant. They'd already tried everything they could think of, thereby not wasting her time. "You say this is in Mexico?" "Yes. It's Tulum, Mayan ruins on the Yucatan Peninsula, on the Caribbean side." "Okay." Nicole chewed her bottom lip, thinking over the logistics. Austin was out of town with his parents, Professor Coolidge was busy with finals, and she and Lizzie, her best friend, were spending the weekend together, getting caught up. Now wouldn't be the best time to make an excursion of this sort. She preferred having at least 3 trusted people go with her on these types of quests, not one. The man must have sensed her hesitation because he rushed to say, "We'll pay your travel, of course. Both ways. And your lodging. And we'll provide a rental car. Anything you need. If you can't tell, we're getting desperate. We've had to keep the ruins closed for weeks now. It's killing tourism, literally. Why haven't I heard about this on the news? We were renovating the visitor center anyway, and it was easy just to pretend that everything is closed while that was happening." "Okay, I'll do it. Send me the information." "Oh, thank you so much." She gave him her email address, then hung up and turned to Lizzie. "Looks like we're heading to some Mayan ruins in Mexico." Lizzie raised an eyebrow. "From listening to your half of the conversation, I know better than to think we're heading there for a vacation." Nicole gave her a half smile. "Sorry. Still, we're getting paid, it's Mayan ruins and we can continue getting caught up on the plane." "Oh, believe me. I'm thrilled. I've always wanted to visit the Yucatan Peninsula." Nicole hugged Lizzie. She loved that her best friend was always up for an adventure. A few moments later, Nicole's phone beeped, alerting her to an email, and she was surprised to find that the man had already made all of the plane, car, and hotel reservations. Excitement bubbled up in Nicole. She was going on another adventure. After getting through customs in Mexico, Nicole and Lizzie drove to their hotel and checked in, deciding to hit the sack for a few hours before driving to Tulum. Juan, Nicole's contact, met them at the visitor center when they arrived. He didn't even need to point out the magical pulse that Nicole sensed the closer they got to Tulum. It was like a smell. It wafted through the air, gently brushing against her. Though it didn't draw her in the way Juan had said it did others, she could still see why it would appeal so much. "Wow," Lizzie said as they followed Juan across the parking lot toward the visitor's center. "Even I can feel it." Nicole glanced at her best friend. "Are you going to be okay coming with me?" Lizzie shrugged. "I don't know. The only way to find out is by trying." "I won't be able to come with you," Juan said, handing Nicole a brochure. "It makes me as sick as it does our visitors. I hope you are able to find it." "I can sense it calling me," Nicole said, flipping open the brochure to a map of the ruins. Shouldn't be too hard to find. The two girls walked past the visitors' center and through an opening in an ancient crumbling wall. Nicole could sense the item calling her, and she put her hand in her pocket, fingering the magical sphere she kept with her at all times. She'd need it to take care of the item that called. That call got stronger and stronger as they walked through the ruins, and soon it had a sort of scent to it, rosemary and tulips. Very distinct and different. The girls passed little buildings that the map said were temples and palaces. The pulse led them to the main castle that overlooked the brilliant white sand of the beach, where pristine water beckoned and palm trees swayed in the breeze. Nicole ached to spread out a towel and do some sunbathing, but she had work to do, so she tucked that desire away. As they wandered through the dark interior of the castle, searching for magical items, Nicole soon realized that the magic wasn't coming from the castle, but from the beach itself. It had to be. She walked to an exterior window and stared out, this time concentrating on the pulse instead of the scenery. Yes, the pulse was stronger in that direction. The girls exited the castle, heading around it to the south, until they found a set of wooden steps leading down to the beach. "I've never seen a place this beautiful be so empty before," Lizzie whispered. Nicole didn't blame her for whispering. A sort of reverence had fallen over them, and noise felt disrespectful. A cool, misty breeze teased Nicole's hair, gently blowing it around her shoulders, and the air was humid and the sun warm. Yet again, Nicole found herself wishing this could be an actual vacation. The pulse led them to the water. Juan hadn't said anything about the ocean, but he probably didn't know. "I don't think I should go with you," Lizzie said. "My magic can't help you underwater, and it's too dangerous for you to protect both of us if anything happens." Nicole paused, contemplating what her friend said. "I think you're right." She hated saying it, though. She had zero desire to do any of this on her own. But Lizzie's power revolved completely around fire, and Nicole would definitely have her hands full, keeping breathable water around her after entering the water. "I'll be waiting right here," Lizzie said. Nicole nodded, then turned to the ocean and started in. The water was warm and pleasant. This definitely was a beach where she could see herself spending a lot of time. As she continued forward, she pulled her hair into a tight ponytail, twisting the strands and tucking them under so they wouldn't get in her face. Once the waves were hitting her neck, she created an air bubble around her head, then stepped under the surface and swam forward. She got caught in the current and was pulled along easily. Nicole kept her eyes open, wanting to make sure she could find her way back to this part of the beach in case the pulse took her too far out. The sandy bottom of the ocean floor gradually dropped down, eventually turning into coral reefs. Nicole climbed over them, glad she'd kept her shoes on. Fish darted in and out of the coral around her, tropical brightly colored ones, and she saw a shark far off. She ignored it, knowing it would probably ignore her. If it didn't, she was an arete for crying out loud. She could fend for herself. The pulse continued drawing her deeper. Eventually, she lost track of the sun as it got darker and darker. How far had she gone? The farther she went, the stronger the magical draw was, so she knew she was still heading in the right direction. As the light from the sun dimmed considerably, she noticed a weird light deep under the water far ahead of her. Ruins gradually took shape in it. What sort of ruins were they? Mayan? Or earlier than that? Were they even made by humans? Based on her experiences, she knew Earth was inhabited not just by humans, but by monsters and demons as well. She hadn't found any underwater. She hadn't been underwater in ages, but it would make sense that there would be creatures dwelling there too. With this realization, she paid even more attention to her surroundings, half expecting something to jump out at her at any minute. The largest building was a temple of some sorts, similar to something that came from ancient Greece. It was in perfect condition. How was that possible? It must have been magically strengthened. Speaking of magic, Nicole had to use hers to get over corals and reefs, not wanting to tire herself physically, since that would cause her to tire magically as well. She used ocean water to lift her over anything too big or too deep to cross easily. As she got closer, she knew for sure that the light came from within the temple. It was an eerie blue-green that was brighter than she'd expected, but not so bright that it made her eyes hurt. Knowing it must be her destination, judging by the direction of the magical pulses, she gently propelled herself through the water, climbing one last very large reef and jumping from it. She landed on a sandy bottom not far from the temple, and for the first time she realized there were no fish around. Something about this place kept them from wanting to be there. Not the best sign ever. Of course, neither was the fact that whatever was down there drove people completely mad, and sometimes to suicide. She had never felt this alone. Not even the sensation that she was being watched was there, and she found herself experiencing a bit of melancholy. A weird feeling crossed Nicole about 20 feet from the temple, a sort of weightlessness that made it hard for her to sense her limbs. Was that coming from outside herself? It must have been. She hoped it wouldn't end up hurting her. As Nicole stepped across the threshold between the huge pillars into the temple, she saw shadows move on the other side. She froze, watching carefully through her air bubble, but nothing moved again. After waiting for several moments, she continued forward. The magical pulses led her to the middle of the wide-open temple, and up some steps to an altar. An ivory statue had been placed on top of the altar. It was about 4 inches tall, and of a 20-something-year-old man's head crowned with olive leaves. Fitting, considering the ancient temple where it was stored. Nicole stepped around the altar, studying the statue and the magical pulses that came from it. She hesitated, waiting, expecting something to jump out at her. Or for it to do something to her. Or do something at all. The magic didn't tell her what its powers were, just that it had them. She circled several times, before glancing around the temple again. Still alone. Her gaze drifted to the pillars where she'd seen the shadow move earlier, but she still wasn't sure her eyes hadn't just been playing tricks on her. Annoyed with her hesitation, Nicole decided just to pick up the statue. She would need to return it to the library, where all magical items were stored anyway, and she couldn't do that where she was. Not without running the risk of flooding the library by opening a link to it from under the ocean. Half expecting an Indiana Jones moment to happen, she picked up the ivory statue. Nothing happened. She slowly turned, stepped down the stairs, and started back the way she'd come. She'd only gone a few feet outside the temple when she noticed shadows slowly following her, just at the edges of her vision in the darker water. Nicole picked up her pace, using her magic to propel her forward, hoping her powers would be faster than whatever was out there. But the speed of the shadows increased as well. When she got back on top of that large reef she'd jumped off earlier, something finally stepped into the open only a few feet from her. It was a fish, or a fish with a man's body, or a man with a fish head instead of a human one. Definitely not a mermaid. It had arms and legs, hands and feet, and a torso, but that was where the similarities with the human ended. Greenish-blue scales covered its limbs, gills lined its neck, and its hands and feet were long and webbed. Nicole's heart pounded against her sternum, and she froze as the thing stared at her, its mouth opening and closing like a regular fish's would. It reached for the ivory statue. Nicole pulled the statue back, shaking her head. She felt a tendril of fear slither down her spine as the fish stepped closer, grabbing her arm. She tried to pry her arm free, but the fish's grip was incredibly strong. "Go away," she said, her voice dissolving into the water surrounding her air bubble. "Leave me alone." The fish released her, staring at her with its huge, unblinking round eyes. It reached for the statue again. Nicole again refused to give it to him. Then the fish did something she didn't expect. It lowered its head and rammed her hard in the stomach, almost making her lose her grip. Nicole gasped in pain, before having the sense to tighten her hold on the statue. She cradled it to her chest and turned and tried to run. It was her first instinct, her flight mode taking over. But running underwater was exactly like running in her nightmares. No matter what she did, she couldn't go faster. Movement on her other side caught her attention, and she glanced that way, horrified to see that more fish people were approaching. They surrounded her in the water, their vacant fish-like expressions impossible to read, their mouths opening and shutting as they continued swallowing water, their eyes staring at her unblinkingly. They swam and walked around her with jerky and angry actions, and she realized if she didn't do something, she would die a worse death than the people who had been drawn to the ivory statue. She needed to tap into her powers as much as possible. Nicole pulled air from the water around her and had it propel her toward where she remembered the shore to be. Instead of the fish people falling back like she'd hoped they would, they increased their speed and kept up. Nicole tried water instead, having it push her along. She was doubtful that it would get her ahead of the beasts, and wasn't surprised when it didn't. The fish lived underwater, for crying out loud. An idea popped in her mind. Instead of just pushing herself forward, she would have the air and water do that while also pushing the fish people back. That seemed to work for a time, but then the creatures got adept at predicting where she would push the water. Nicole couldn't risk losing concentration on what she was doing to keep herself alive, the air bubble. Deciding it was time to go on the offensive, she magically reached toward the coral reef and picked it up, along with a ton of dirt at the same time, dumping it on as many of the fish people as she could. And then, through the resulting dust, she propelled herself as far away as fast as possible. She knew she was using too much magic. She was a lot more powerful than she had been a while ago, but she was still underwater with the pressure of the ocean crushing against her. If she wasn't careful, she would lose physical strength before she reached the surface. That was a risk she had to take, though. Most of the fish people got lost under the dirt she piled on top of them, but some of the stronger ones caught up with her. They obviously really wanted the ivory statue. It occurred to her that the statue was probably calling to them, as much as it was calling to the humans who had visited the Tulum ruins. Nicole continued heading toward the shore, climbing up the reefs, using magic to make herself lighter to help her get over them. The closer she got to shore, the more the darkness in the water dissipated as the sun's rays reached her. The stronger fish kept up with her easily, no matter what she did. She had to wonder if they were magical beings too. They didn't have a magical print, but that didn't mean they didn't have special abilities. Nicole used her powers to grab more coral, tossing it at the fish behind her, grinning when most of it hit the beasts, knocking them out. But then, one of the fish caught up with her and grabbed her leg, jerking her to a stop. Another fish grabbed her free arm. The two of them pulled and twisted her in every direction, prying at the statue. In a moment of panic, as Nicole tried to free herself from the fish, she lost control over the air bubble around her head and sucked in a mouthful of water. Nicole gagged, choked, as salty water filled her lungs. The fish released her, and she desperately pulled air to herself, reforming the bubble. Her lungs spasmed and she coughed and coughed, her chest burning, spitting out tons of water. Just as she was gaining control over herself again, she realized the statue was gone. Obviously, that was the reason the fish people had left her. They'd succeeded in their objective. Nicole turned to go after them, unwilling to accept failure, especially when no one else could take care of the ivory statue. She was the guardian of magical items, for crying out loud. She'd only swam after the fish for a moment when she realized something. Nicole could make the ivory object come to her. She had control over earth properties, dirt, stone, rock, etc., after all. And now that she'd been around it, she was able to search for its print and find it, even as it got farther and farther away. Nicole summoned a huge portion of magic and shot it toward the ivory statue, commanding the molecules that made up the object to obey her and bring themselves to her. She wasn't surprised when the statue obeyed. It slammed into her chest, nearly knocking the wind out of her, but she reacted quickly, spinning around before having the water propel her to the shore. Nicole broke the surface, but was forced to keep the air bubble around her head as wave after wave crashed over her. She dragged herself closer to the beach. Where had she ended up? None of this looked familiar. Oh, there, she'd washed up about 500 yards down the beach from Lizzie. The girl stood waiting, watching. Just as Nicole got to where the water was only ankle high, several of the fish caught up to her again, grabbing at her, trying to pull her back under the water. She fell hard, slamming against the beach, the wind getting knocked out of her. The fish dragged her 15 feet back under the water, again prying at the statue, before she was able to free herself once more. She only kept her hold on the statue because of the bit of magic she still had spun around the thing, commanding it to stay with her. Thank goodness for Arete powers. Nicole wasn't aware that she'd been shrieking and screaming at the fish until Lizzie raced toward them, fire in her hands. The fish people stared at this new threat dumbly, before dismissing her and turning back to Nicole, again groping at her and yanking her back toward the water. How were they breathing on land? Lizzie grabbed the fish people by the arms and legs, touching and burning them wherever she could reach, as Nicole continued kicking and scrambling to get away from them, clutching the statue to her chest. The fish freaked out, gurgling in pain as Lizzie burned them, and Nicole, realizing just how powerful fire was against these beasts, summoned some of her own and started frying the creatures too. Recognizing what they were up against, the fish people scrambled to get away from the girls as quickly as possible. Rather than dropping to the sand in exhaustion like she was tempted to do, Nicole raced away from the water, wanting to get as much distance between it and herself as possible. She ignored as Lizzie trailed, shrieking questions, and kept glancing behind them, hoping the fish people had given up. Apparently, the call of the ivory statue was too much though, because the creatures emerged once again from the water and ran after the girls, their webbed feet slapping against the wet sand as they neared. More and more of the beasts popped out of the water, joining in the pursuit. The only way to stop them permanently was to eliminate the draw of the magical statue. Nicole pulled the sphere from her pocket, grateful it hadn't been lost while she'd been underwater. She opened a special, magical door, before thrusting the ivory statue into the enclosed space behind it. Then she slammed the door shut, forever hiding the ivory statue from the fish people. As soon as that door shut, the creatures freaked out. They raced after the girls even faster, their arms and legs jerking as they ran. Many more came out of the water, and threw seaweed, rocks, and shells at Nicole and Lizzie. Now that she was on land though, Nicole was able to attack with all 4 elements. She slammed the fish with fire, wind, and sand. Over and over and over again, her explosions blasted and erupted around them, pushing them back toward the water. The smell of burning fish made her gag, but she didn't stop her attack. Finally, the fish retreated. They didn't even give her another glance, as they disappeared under the water. Nicole waited for 5 full minutes, watching for the fish people, staring into the water. Nothing happened. The beasts had truly given up. She collapsed on the beach, breathing heavily, coughing up water occasionally, staring at the bright blue sky as the waves tickled her toes. "So?" Lizzie said. "That was exciting." "Aha." It was the only response Nicole could muster. Neither said anything else as the girls continued catching their breath, the wind and sun slowly drying them. They heard voices coming, and finally got to their feet, brushing the dried sand from their clothes. With a glance at each other, the girls hiked the stairs. Nicole wasn't surprised to see people walking toward them through the ruins. Juan was at the front of the group. "You did it," he said. "We all sensed it, as you took care of the magical object." "What was it?" "An ivory statue of some Roman emperor, I think," Nicole said. She would have liked more time to study it, but now that she knew how powerful its call was, she'd never remove it from where she'd put it. Something occurred to her, and she glanced at Juan. "Don't let people go too deep into the water," she said. "The magical item is gone, but its guardians are still there." Juan nodded, his gaze dropping to the scratches on her arms where Nicole hadn't even realized she'd been cut. "We won't?" He shook her hand and thanked her, then grinned broadly. "How about some dinner and time in Cancun before you head home?" "That sounds great," Nicole said. She was ready for a vacation. This has been The Deep Ones, a Mosaic and Koven Chronicles short story by Andrea Pearson. Thank you for listening.